This is Alissa.
And this is Caroline. Welcome to Med Surg Moments, the AMSN podcast.
This podcast is an engaging look at the lives of and surrounding medical surgical nurses.
We are proud medical surgical nurses just like you, sharing our stories, insights, and experiences to support you in your nursing journey. It's wonderful to have with us today our special guest, AMSN and MSNCB CEO, Dr. Terri Hinkley. Dr. Hinkley is here to talk today about competencies, but since she is somewhat an honorary co-host here on Med Surg Moments, we'll give her the honors of starting us off with personal updates. Dr. Hinkley, what's new with you?
Just Terry's perfect. Don't need to be so
Terri.
formal when we're among friends. What's new? We're very excited. Our youngest daughter, she's 18, graduated from school 2 weeks ago in Lake Placid. So that was wonderful. A little bittersweet. My parents and my husband's parents weren't able to travel, and we still can't go home and see family. So we're at 18 months now since we've last seen family, which is horribly isolating, which I know a lot of folks can relate to. But I'm happy to see the US opening up, and I just really hope that Canada is able to follow suit soon.
I cannot imagine you not seeing your family for this long.
Yeah. It's tough, no question about it. To see the border and be so close, it must be terrible. But things will slowly return into normal, and we have to just hope it'll be sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
Alyssa, what's new with you?
Well, I apparently don't think I'm busy enough because I've taken on another job. So I am working on my PhD. I've told you guys that before, and I decided to get a job at my college. So I am now going to be tutoring master's students.
All right.
If there's a crack of time in my day, I'll fill it. Is pretty much how it works, I guess.
That's awesome. That's good for you.
There's nothing going on in my world. No, it's really, we're getting back to a sense of normalcy. That's for sure. We have increased our class sizes now back to 100% capacity. We now have the directive that if we have been fully vaccinated, it is our choice if we wear a mask. I actually went to the grocery store this week in Pasco County, Florida, and we don't have to put the mask on anymore. And it almost felt a little weird because we have become so conditioned so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be weird for a long time, Caroline. Yeah. Did you take your mask off or not wear your mask?
I did.
And how did that feel? Because I anticipate in myself some anxiety, like some mask anxiety.
Well, because people are still wearing masks, you wonder, are you doing the right thing? But for me, I have a certain degree of hearing loss. And so I just feel like if I can see everyone's lips, I can hear everyone much better. So if I take my mask off, that decreases their level of anxiety, and they're more likely to take their mask off so I can look at their face and hear what's going on. So it's a little different for me because of my hearing. I was listening to the radio this morning on the way to work, and the question of the day was, what's the one thing that shows we're getting back to normal? And people were talking about the masks and not having to social distance. And you know what the answer was? The samples are back in Costco.
Oh, that's awesome.
The world is normal because now we can walk our way and feast our way around Costco.
Like, I don't know if those have returned yet here at home, but I'm glad they're backing you. That's awesome.
So now everyone has a completely different skill set when it comes to delivering food. Now we perhaps don't have to have 3 masks on and 4 pairs of gloves and wash our hands every time. So it leads us in nicely to our topic for today's Med Surg Moments, competency. We've all asked ourselves from time to time, am I competent? It's a loaded question.
Totally.
And we are very excited to announce that AMSN is about to launch the first ever competency model for medical surgical nurses across their career span. And Dr. Hinkley, or just Terri, is here to join in the conversation. And let's start with a basic question, Terri. What are competencies and why are they important?
How much time do y'all have? Because I could just talk for hours about competencies. I geek out a little bit about competencies because I think that what's misunderstood oftentimes is that we equate a certain amount of time in a position with competency levels. I always tell this one story. I've been a nurse for 32 years. I spent 25 years of those in an emergency department. And so by the time I had 30 years of experience or almost 30 years of experience, 25 of which was in emergency, one would think that I was a pretty expert nurse. And I truly was. I felt that I had great competency. I could handle an emergency like it was nobody's business. I was ACLS certified, PALS certified. I had all of this work experience, but in the entire course of my career, my 25 years in the emergency department, thank goodness, I never, ever once had a pediatric cardiac arrest. Never once. And that's luck of the draw, right?
That's a lot to be said for that. Yeah.
And so would I consider myself to be competent? I consider myself to be proficient because I did PALS, and PALS is pediatric advanced cardiac life support. So you know what to do and you know how to run through that, but I had never done it. So I always caution using years of experience as a marker for competence because it's so much more than that. And most basically at its base level, competence is the knowledge, skills, and ability to do something. So again, going back to my pediatric cardiac arrest, I had the knowledge and the skill because I had done PALS and I was such an experienced nurse, but I don't know that I would say that I had the ability. I probably would have in the situation, but again, really hard to equate being able to do something really well in adults and then trying to do it in my personal example that I'm sharing with you, do it in a pediatric situation where emotions are that much higher and there's a lot of other things like families and parents and a lot of other considerations. I share that just because I always find that it's something that resonates with people, and you probably both can think of something in your own personal experience where you could be working with a nurse that's got 10 years experience and they come to you and say, can you help me with this? Because I literally have never done it or seen it.
Totally have had those experiences, especially when I moved into the educator role. You suddenly become the expert in everything that no one else has ever done. So, yeah.
But as an educator, you may not have done it, but you know where to find the answer out.
Absolutely. I have a checklist. I have a reference. Absolutely.
That's right.
Terri, why don't you walk us through the process that led AMSN's conclusion that a competency-based model was needed?
As you guys might remember, I joined AMSN almost 4 years ago. It'll be 4 years in August, which is really exciting. Time has flown and I've loved every second of it. But I joined AMSN in 2017 and I'd done some work with competencies at a previous association that I was at. So I'm really interested and fascinated with that sort of body of knowledge anyway. And one of the things we were talking at the board level around what education our members need and what support they need and all of those things that AMSN should be providing. And we started talking about competencies. And when I went out to look, there literally was no competencies out there for med surg nurses other than obviously some that are hospital specific. Or what I found a lot of were skills checklists. And again, remember knowledge, skills, and ability. So skills checklists are absolutely valuable. I don't mean to diminish them, but they're only 1/3 of what actually makes someone competent. So we decided that there was no one better than us, quite frankly, to toot our own horn. As the Professional Association for Med Surg Nurses, we felt that it was our responsibility to put the stake in the ground, as it were, and say, these are what the competencies are for nurses. So the board approved developing the competency model. I don't know if you've noticed, I hope you've noticed that one of the things that we take really seriously at AMSN is if we're going to do something, we're going to do it well. Like we're going to put the effort and the quality and the rigor into anything that we do. So of course, we approached the competency model in much the same way. And we convened a steering committee. And now this steering committee was made up of non-AMSN members, but nurse leaders in different areas. And we looked at education, practice, regulation. We even had someone from NCSBN on our steering committee because we were trying to think holistically about nursing practice and policy. So we had nursing, education, regulation, policy, and practice at a leadership level guiding the work that was being done. And then we formed a task force. And this task force was made up of just such incredible nurses from around the country. But again, in being very intentional, what we did was we actually made sure that we were geographically diverse, that we were diverse in hospital size, in hospital type, and in practice setting. And what that means is, again, we've talked a lot on the podcast and within AMSN that Med Surg is a specialty, first and foremost. But also, Med Surg is what you practice and not where, because we know that Med Surg is a practice that crosses over a number of different types of nursing practice. And it's not just acute care. And we tend to be very acute care focused, and we're trying to do a better job of not being that, but also recognizing a home care nurse. A home care nurse is, for the all intents and purposes, practicing Med Surg. They're just doing it in a different location. Community-based nurses, freestanding outpatient clinics. Med Surg is being practiced in a multitude of settings. So we made sure that we had representation from all of those practice settings. We had a prison nurse, we had outpatient nurses, we had geographical representation. We had everything from a small rural hospital with less than 100 beds up to academic medical centers with 500 plus beds. And we did that intentionally to ensure that we were hearing from nurses all around the country and from different practice environments. And then we literally set to work. We had consultants that we worked with, Jennifer Naughton, who actually is an expert in kind of competency and capability development in the learning and development space. And then we worked with a psychometrician, Dr. Manny Straley, who specializes in certification, assessment, and measurement. So our competency model, developed by this core group of task force members, is psychometrically valid. It can be measured, it can be tested and quantified. So we are just over the moon excited to have taken it so seriously and trying to do something more than just throwing some stuff on paper and calling it a day.
Yeah, this sounds really exciting. Not only have you got the tools, but you can measure for effectiveness. And that's all, we're all about outcomes in Med Surg. So this sounds really exciting. Tell us more. How was the competency model developed?
So we brought the task force together, and gosh, boy, we certainly worked them hard. God, they just did such an outstanding job and gave so freely of their time. We started with a lot of literature review. We actually did a comprehensive literature review of nurse competency. We looked at Donna Wright's model. We looked at Patricia Benner's novice to expert. We looked at the literature, and then we looked at hundreds, honestly, of job descriptions, and we started to whittle down from there. And then we had the task force literally start to build those competencies. Now, one of the things that I'm most excited about is that the competencies really are intended to serve Med Surg over the entire career lifespan or life cycle of a nurse. So we are going from novice to expert, although we don't call it that because we know not nurses and many individuals don't like to be called novices. So we're actually focusing at the emerging, established, and expert levels. And we looked at it in terms of, we have 3 subdomains. So the subdomains are professional concepts. Those are things like professional identity, leadership, those sort of concepts that are important to the practice of nursing. And then we looked at practice and patient management. And that's where you'll find things like nutrition, medication management, communication, and those sorts of things, really hands-on, the skills, knowledge, and abilities that you need in caring for patients. And then we did something that I think a lot of competency experts are really interested in, but struggle sometimes with how to be able to do it. We built a soft skill side of our assessment. Inherent in competency is your individual attributes. So we actually use the Big 5 personality assessment as part of our competency model, which give us an indication of who you are as an individual, coupled with those competencies, which we can measure across those 3 levels. And they provide a comprehensive overview of your competency as a Med Surg nurse. Now, the last thing that we did, which I think is also very different from any other folks that I'm familiar with in terms of competency modeling that's out there, is we then validated every single one of those competencies against patient and individual outcomes. So we can actually tie each of the competencies to the patient safety or quality outcomes that they influence, as well as the individual nurse outcomes like job satisfaction, et cetera, that are impacted through these competencies.
Holy cow. This sounds like a lot of work and it sounds really amazing. So I guess my question is how do you envision this competency model assisting nurses in managing their career development in their med surg nursing?
Oh gosh.
Vision.
So this is the part where I can geek out and I could talk forever because I think that there's just so many applications. So we'll talk about a few of them. And I know that there's probably more and we could do part 2 and part 3 on this. But let's say, for example, you're coming out of school and we know that COVID significantly disrupted nursing schools. We know that there are nurses graduating who actually haven't had a clinical experience. So they're coming out of school and going into the professional environment, never having touched a patient. We know that there are nurses whose clinical, that maybe they did have some clinical, but they were cut short or they were abbreviated. And those nurses can use this competency assessment as a demonstration to HR and the hiring manager where their competencies are actually coming in at. It can help make their orientation more specific and more effective because now you're focusing on the areas of need. You can do the same for when individuals are transferred. Even if they have experience, when you're bringing them or hiring them into your institution, in a med surg role, you can have them do this competency assessment and you can measure again where their gaps are and where the opportunities for further development are. And you can make individualized learning plans for those nurses, which I think first and foremost makes the most sense and is the most effective and efficient use of our resources. The other thing, we did a podcast quite a while ago back, I think Alissa, you might have done it episode 22 or so, where we talked about continuing competence. So we talked about the fact that nurses that hold certification is going to be required sooner rather than later, although I don't have a definitive timeline for you. It is going to be required that nurses that have certification have to demonstrate that through the process of recertification, they are actually maintaining or further developing their competence. Whereas nurses previously, and I 100% understand the reason for it, we've all done it, we've all been there, have focused on whatever CE I can get my hands on to get an hour or 2 hours to put towards my recertification or my licensure requirements. For recertification, we are going to have through MSNCB a process of actually knowing how you're building competence or how you're furthering competence. So this assessment, this competency assessment, will be a really great tool for certified nurses to identify where they might need to build further competence and then to be able to close those gaps and evidence it through the competency model. So we think that's another area where we'll see a lot of really good interest and engagement. So I think quite honestly, you'll see it in institutions where they're going to want to have a sense of the ongoing competency of their staff on their med surg units and look at the collective competency, because again, we don't work in silos. We don't work individually. We work in a team. And you're going to want to make sure as an employer, or I would want to make sure as an employer, and Alissa, I'd love your perspectives and yours, Caroline, too, that at least within the team, you have all of the competencies covered off and you can consider what the team might need in terms of closing those competencies.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that would help plan skills fairs and all that kind of stuff. And so you'd know your skill mix when you're making your schedule for the unit. I want this right now, actually.
6 more weeks. Yeah. So we're about 6 weeks out. So it should be around mid-July. I will even hazard a guess and say maybe late July, because what we're waiting on right now is just the finalization of the technology. We actually built a custom platform for this so that we can house this all within AMSN's platform and have it be a really good user experience. What you will get is an individualized report. You can share that. You can share that with your manager, HR, or anyone else. And you will actually be able to benchmark yourself against your peers. So the dashboard, you'll get dashboard reporting as well. And you can see where your competency falls relative to the universe of med surg nurses that have completed the competency model.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, isn't it? I'm just trying to process everything that you're saying. I think that this is going to really re-energize medical surgical nurses. It'll move us away from the dreaded skills fairs that a lot of us were weaned on. It will keep med surg nurses engaged and motivated to want to learn and to continue to learn by way of validating what they do every single day. I also love the concept of the team approach here, because we just cannot work individually. We have to be a team. And if we can pull competencies in as part of that, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. I hope there's going to be lots of convention about this.
Oh really my gosh, I know.
Fabulous. Great work. Wonderful team that you pulled together.
It was really a labor of love. And I can't thank enough all of our volunteers that just gave so willingly of their time and their expertise to help us develop this. I really think that there is nothing like this out there. And funny, you both said like this will change things. One of the things that I think it's going to do, and we talked very briefly about this earlier, is I think it's going to bring a recognition of what actually is med surg nursing, which I think is underappreciated and under-recognized for the skills
definitely.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
It takes it back to that very first, is med surg nursing a stepping stone or a specialty? And with an entire competency for med surg nursing, you really are putting it in writing. No, this is a specialty. And look at how complex it is. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to write off or discount the knowledge of the med surg nurse.
Exactly. And I also hope my vision long-term, and this is my pipe dream, so we'll see what ends up happening. But what I'm really interested in is actually trying to broaden this beyond just med surg. Now, what I mean by that is, wouldn't it be great if all of the nursing specialties, or if the nursing profession more broadly came together and said, here's the competencies required regardless of the practice setting. And what changes is the actual tasks that happen within those practice settings. And I'll give you an example. So I mentioned that one of our subdomain competencies is nutrition. In the emergency department, I had to worry about nutrition too. What I worried about was probably slightly different than what the med surg nurse worries about, but not much. And what the ICU nurse worries about with nutrition probably isn't much different then again. So can we agree in principle that every single nurse has to consider and have competency in the nutritional domain? 100%. So can we start talking with that common language? Because then for nurses that do want to transition to another specialty area, or even in times like COVID, where we moved people around, you're talking a common language. And now you're just measuring, well, you understood it in the context of this care environment. Do you understand it in the context of this? And you can measure that easily. So that would be my pipe dream. If I had a magic wand and I could make anything happen, because I think that eliminates a lot of confusion for nurses. It helps you plan your career path. It helps you plan even from emerging to expert. It allows you to understand the difference between where you are and where you aspire to be. And you can always build and close those gaps.
That's awesome. My organization that I'm working for, we have been working on trying to do that same concept of a core orientation. What does every single nurse in the organization, what should they know? Every nurse, there's a core set of skills that they all share. Man, if you could get that at an even higher level than just an organization, at a national level, let's get all of the organizations talking. That would be so great.
Yeah, it sounds so fundamental. It's like, where have you been all of my life? Why haven't we, what suddenly made this all come together and sound completely logical and completely sensical and really do a lot to increase the nurses' competency and capability. I think that was the word you used. I just cannot wait to get this launched and see it out there and start utilizing it. I think it's going to do a lot for taking the mundane component of competency, emphasizing the reason why it's so important. And once again, the fact that medical surgical nursing is a specialty, and never more have we seen that than in the past 12 months when we've had to float people to different areas. You already spoke to that, Terri. People realize that we're not just that stepping stone. we actually have a little bit more to us than that.
So,
amen. Absolutely.
Fabulous. Cannot wait to see this get released and put it into good use.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, more to come. And just like I said, mid to late July, we should be launching this with great fanfare just because of the effort. And we think that this is game changing, quite honestly.
That's great.
We think that this is game changing for the profession.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's always good to hear what's going on and keeping us all interested and excited and motivated about competencies in our specialty of Med Surg nursing. So thank you once again. It's been great having you.
Oh, always a pleasure. I feel like I'm just going to start bombing in on these podcasts soon because it's just so much fun to hang with y'all.
You're always welcome.
You're always welcome.
We look forward to connecting with you on our next episode of Med Surg Moments, the AMSN podcast. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions, topic ideas, and feedback via our official Med Surg Moments email address, amsnpod@amsn.org. That's amsnpod@amsn.org.
We'd also like to remind you to become a member of AMSN or renew your membership at www.amsn.org. You'll receive lots of cool benefits and perks, such as discounted pricing on the annual convention and continuing education.
We encourage you to help us spread the word and subscribe to Med Surg Moments podcast via your smartphone podcast app to receive notifications of future episodes. Please be sure to leave us a review and recommend Med Surg Moments wherever you get your podcasts to help us reach even more listeners.
We invite you to join the conversation by sharing your ideas and questions on AMSN's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter pages. And don't forget to add #MedSurgMoments to your post. Simply enter AMSN in the search field on any of these social media platforms to connect with us.
The content within the Med Surg Moments podcast represents the views, thoughts, and opinions of the co-hosts and may not necessarily reflect the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses.
Until next time, I'm Caroline.
I'm Alissa, and always remember, Med Surg Moments is a moment in our lives, a moment in our Med Surg careers that makes a huge difference.